To change it up a little bit, today I'm going to be talking about protection training. So protection training is a bit of a blanket statement that covers a bunch of different applications. Protection training could mean sport protection training. Now, if we talk about sport protection training, we talk about a number of different sports. There could be IGP, one of the ring sports like Mondio, French, or Belgian ring. Or we could be talking about some of the American sports like PSA, APPDA, Canine Street League. There is just so many differences out there in the sports, what is required about the sport, the level of complexity of each sport, and so many factors. So that alone can be an entirely complex topic in itself. But if we zoom out a little bit more, there's also more to the word protection training. There's also personal protection training, which is different. And then additionally, there is police and military patrol work, which could be categorized as protection work, right? You could articulate that the police dog chasing the bad guy is some sort of protection training involved as well. So why I'm going to be talking about that is because I got a really interesting question from a client. I'm not going to disclose the name of the client, the name of the dog, or anything like that. But the reason I'm making this episode is because it was a really good question. I wanted to get additional details, so the client gave me additional details. So I wanted to expand the way I expanded to her and why it made sense to her. And I'm going to give you my opinion on this as well. So here's the question. Without further ado, here's the question. So we're training this dog in personal protection. A little bit of background of this client. I'm helping this client with her dog. It's a young dog. Got it from a really good breeder. So it's a good dog. When I say good breeder, I don't mean like some person off the internet. I mean, if I told you who it is, I'm going to even not disclose that. But if I told you the name of the breeder, most of dog people in any capacity of dog training or protection training, you would recognize his name instantly because he's not just a breeder, he's also a big name in the industry. But anyway, so she has one of his dogs, and she's come to me since the dog was a puppy. Now, the client, is not a personal protection trainer. She is a client with a nice dog, and the purpose for which the client got the dog was for personal protection first and foremost. But she's also considering PSA more of a secondary collateral duty, so to speak. Primarily personal protection, but she also wants to do PSA. She's shown some interest in that as well, but primarily personal protection. So we've been working in the introduction to protection training with the focus being on personal protection, which the introduction is a little bit different. The focus is a little bit different. The training is a little bit different. So the process is a little bit different naturally, and our goal is going to be a little bit different. Not just because of the goal of the client, which is personal protection, but also because of the dog. Now, dogs they vary from temperament to temperament, genetics to genetics. This particular dog is a little bit more on the defensive side. It's a nice dog, confident, social, but you can tell the dog is a little bit more on the defensive side. I'm not saying the dog is suspicious. The dog is actually friendly. But when you work the dog thrives a little bit more in a little bit of defense. As a matter of fact, even when activated into prey, you can feel the work just kind of leaning a little bit more towards the defensive side. It's hard to explain unless you're familiar with protection training. But just to give you a little bit of an idea, the dog is more on the defensive side. Now, what do I mean by defensive versus prey? If you don't understand that, I have videos on that topic. So if you kind of go through the podcast, or if you go to my YouTube channel and you look up protection training, dog training is my passion. If you go to one of my playlists, you probably find something like that, but it's something that expands on those two topics. But just in a nutshell, defensive drive is more of the self-preservation drive. Okay, it's the dog's strategy for self-preservation when presented with a threat. And that could be forward or that could be, flight. So fight, flight, response. And obviously in protection training, we are, we're betting and we're promoting and encouraging the fight response in a way that the dog still wins. In a nutshell, without giving you a ton of detail, okay, that's defense drive. Prey drive is a little bit different. I'm going to condense the definition of prey drive as well. So prey drive is more of the chase drive. It's the animal's desire to chase. Now that in itself can be an entirely complex topic, which I also have material on that. But essentially, prey is more the dog's desire to chase, and the dog's desire to chase has the sequence of stalk, orient, stalk, chase, bite, grab, bite, dissect, and consume. So that's the sequence. It doesn't mean that a dog in prey is going to go through the entire sequence, so will consume and kill, but there is some sort of leniency towards the predatory sequence. Whether that leniency will stop at stalking, or whether that leniency will stop at chasing, or whether that leniency will go all the way to biting. But the prey, when we're working the dog in prey, the dog is not in a self-preservation mode. The dog is more on a chase mode, which is typically more fun, so to speak. Okay, so the desire is different. It's not so much self-preservation as it is more of a pursuit. Okay, so in a nutshell, in a very condensed way of defining prey drive, those are the differences. So when we train a dog in personal protection, the emphasis should be more on defense drive. It should be a little bit more on the self-preservation. For personal protection, that's the emphasis. Now, if you have further questions on that, again, look at my other videos. I don't want this episode to be about prey versus defense. I don't want the episode to be about protection training in general. I want it to be about a very specific topic, but I'm just giving you the foundation and a background before I dive into the main topic, which is a really good topic. So bear with me. If you don't understand, make some notes. So you can go through the videos, or make some notes so you can just send me a message or comment and let me know if you want me to expand a little bit more on some of what I'm talking about. So essentially, when we're training a protection dog, we want to capitalize and encourage the defense drive. Sport training, typically, we want to capitalize and encourage the prey drive, okay, more of a pursuit. Police training, depending on the application, typically is more of a pursuit. Although there also needs to be some defense drive, right? Some self-preservation. And those are the generalizations. But anyway, so the client asked me this question, sent me a message, and asked me the following question, which I thought was a great question. I'm going to tell you the question, I'm going to tell you my answer, and then I'm going to dive deep into it. The question is, just so I don't forget to ask, what if, she mentioned the dog's name, is so ball crazy that she goes for it instead of the man? Okay, so what if her dog is so ball crazy, because we are training with the ball in obedience training. Okay, so when we do some obedience, she is doing some competitive obedience, which for competitive obedience, we want power. We don't want just a dog to passively and just casually and passively walk next to us In competition obedience, we want the dog to walk with a lot of power. So for that to happen, we use rewards, we use food, you use toys. And a lot of the personal protection trainers are against that for some reason. But anyway, she's a very educated client. She is not just she's not just coming to the lessons, but she's very active about learning and getting as much info as she can. So she's exposed to some of this other stuff. So her question was, what if her dog, okay, is so ball crazy, because we are training with the ball in obedience training, in competitive obedience training, that she goes for it instead of the man. So in her hypothetical question, what if, the way I'm reading the question is, what if we're in a protection scenario and the dog gets distracted by a ball versus the man, versus the task at hand? So in a real scenario, this is the way I'm reading it. What if in a real scenario, there happens to be a ball flying around and the dog goes, ball, and then just goes for the ball instead of doing her job, which in her case, would be protecting her. So it's an interesting question. It's a good question. So here is how I responded. I'm going to break it down a little bit for you as well. So here's what I replied. I said, entirely different and incompatible drives. And then I used the example of my dog, Rust. Rust, which she knows. She knows Rust. She doesn't know him personally, but she's seen a lot of videos of him. Rust, a sport dog, trained as a sport dog, obsessed with the ball, ignore the ball for the man, which is suited and unsuited decoy. Okay, I do PSA, so there is suited decoys, and in the upper levels, in the level 3s, there is unsuited decoys. These decoys have no equipment, no sleeves, no bite suits. So I said, Russ, my dog, a sport dog, trained as a sport dog. He was not trained as a personal protection dog. Okay, obsessed with the ball, which he is highly he's obsessed with the ball. Like, ball is life for him. Okay, ignored the ball for the man. He's done it on many occasions. If it doesn't happen with a dog like him, it's unlikely to happen. Okay, and I'm saying unlikely to happen. I'm not being black and white as, no, it will never happen. I'm saying if it doesn't happen with a dog that is so obsessed with the ball, which he's one of the most ball-obsessed dogs I've ever seen, but he will ignore it when it comes to if it's a choice between biting, quote unquote, the man, which could be suited or unsuited, he'll go for the man over the ball. If it doesn't happen with a dog like him, it's very unlikely to happen. Okay, it's very unlikely to happen if, I continue on my reply, A, we have the right dog. Okay, so it's unlikely to happen if we have the right dog. So meaning, look, if I have a dog that is really has zero interest, has not been selected, properly introduced to protection training, has no idea what is going on, nobody has shown it what is going on, and we have the scenario of, quote unquote, the man, and a ball comes flying, I can't tell you. It's such a hypothetical scenario that if we don't have the right genetically bred, temperament selected, properly introduced dog, if we don't have that, I don't know. So all I can tell you is it's unlikely to happen if we have the right dog. Now, if we don't have the right dog, meaning they're not genetically bred, temperament selected, properly introduced in training, I don't know what might happen. The dog might chase the ball if that's the type of dog we have. But if we have the right type of dog, then it's incredibly unlikely to happen. Okay, or B, okay, meaning it's unlikely to happen if B, we have the slightest idea of what we're doing. Okay, the slightest idea. I'm not even saying you have to be an expert. And I'm saying this because you could sort of get by on some a little bit of training, and if you have a decent dog, genetically bred, temperament selected, and you have even the mildest idea of what you're doing, again, it's unlikely that the dog will go, oh, ball, instead of the quote unquote man. Okay, that's been my experience. So if we have the right dog and if we have the slightest idea of what we're doing, that is very unlikely to happen. Okay, so I continue with my reply. Also, I would need more context, which is true. This is a hypothetical question. Like the way she asked me was a hypothetical question. So I said, I would need more context. If the man, is in the middle of an attack, right? So is the man in the middle of an attack? Is that the context? Like if the man actually attacking you? Okay, if so, there's no way your dog, and I'm talking about her dog specifically, if so, there's no way your dog will stop for a break to chase the ball. Her self-preservation will not let her, because this is a defensive dog. Okay, I know her dog. If you start approaching, and this is still a young dog, by the way. She's not even finished. She's a very young, not even a year old. Very, very young dog, but super nice dog. Okay, so knowing her dog, I'm telling you, and I'm telling her, if it's in the context of the bad guy is in the middle of an attack, her dog will be engaged in so much defense. I can guarantee you she's not going to go ball and then just, go flying after the ball, because I know the dog. This is not a hypothetical in the sense that I know the dog and I know these scenarios because we've practiced some of these scenarios, not with the ball, but just with the defense drive, okay? So another context could be, is the man friendly? Okay, so if the man is friendly, is he not a threat? Is he just playing with your dog? If so, why would we send your dog on a person who isn't a threat? Right, so, and the reason I'm saying that as a hypothetical is, again, looking back at some of the personal protection people, some, not all, some of the personal protection people, they're of the mind of your dog should never say hi to anybody. Don't particularly agree with that, and I have a video explaining why that is, but I don't particularly agree with that. Some people are of the belief of, if you have a personal protection dog, it should not be social with anybody. Highly, highly disagree with that statement. But, is the man friendly? Is he not a threat? If he's not a threat, why would we send her on a person who isn't an active threat? All right, so I put so many different possible answers for that. But in general, you would need to justify sending her on a passive person. Okay, even then, we can train her to ignore the ball and attack a passive bad guy. And then I put, to clarify, in PSA, we train dogs to do that all the time, which is true. If you're not familiar with PSA or with the upper levels of PSA, it's crazy. They're asking you to do very specific, highly specialized skills in PSA, in the upper levels of PSA, that you will not see in other sports. That's hands down. You're just not going to see them in other sports. Okay. So then I continue with my response. Additionally, it's common practice to reward even protection dogs with a ball, during protection training. And the desire to chase the ball never exceeds protection work. So I'll clarify that to you now. So I say it's common practice to reward protection dogs with a ball during protection training. Now, when would we do that? Well, I'll give you a quick example. If I'm doing a protection scenario and I want to reward my dog for ignoring a distraction that could be a bite. Okay, I'm talking more sports, but I've also seen this in personal protection training. Okay, for instance, I send my dog on a training scenario. I send my dog on the bad guy. The bad guy gets bit, gets punched, whatever. That gets over and done with. The scenario is over and done with. Then I walk away with my dog. Whilst I'm walking away with my dog, There's a very high chance that my dog will be, depending on the scenario, there's a chance that my dog would be still going, oh my God, I want to beat that mother effer up. I still want to go at it, right? Well, we don't want that. We want to be able to switch it off. Now, with some dogs, it's easier to switch them off. With some, you have to be a little bit more convincing. You can be a little bit more convincing by using pressure. You can also be a little bit more convincing by letting them know, okay, now that you're doing well with me, okay, the protection scenario is over. Now we're doing something else. Here is food or some sort of reward, which could be a ball, to let you know, okay, now pay attention to me, things are great. And it never affects anything. And this is me talking to you, okay, me talking to you. It doesn't affect the training, which also some personal protection trainers are against that. They're like, the dog should not work for a ball. They should not work for food. The dog should work for you. Again, a statement I disagree with. Okay, why do I disagree with these statements? Not because I think that it's wrong, not because I hypothesize that that's not true. That's because I've done it and I've seen it done for so many years and never affect the relationship with the owner, never affect anything, okay? Never seen it affect the relationship with the owner. To use rewards like a ball or food in training. In any training, even if it's just obedience training, right? Some of these people believe that if you do that, the dog will work for the ball, the dog will work for the food, the dog will not work for you. That's their reasoning. Well, I'm telling you again, from experience, that's not the case. When they say that, their view of a ball, their view of the toy, their view of that is transactional. They're looking at it as it is a transaction. When we do transactions, yes, the dog is not doing it for you, quote unquote. The dog is doing it for the reward. That is what they're talking about, which again is still a very shallow view of the training process. Okay. If it is transactional, sometimes in training, we have to do some transactional things. Look, I could teach my young puppy to down by using pressure, or I could teach him to down by using his mealtime. Okay, if I let him know, look, we're going to do this little exercise. You have to eat anyway, right? So you have to eat anyway. Let's earn the food by doing these little exercises. Well, what I'm doing then is I'm using the food as transaction for the sake of mechanics, for the sake of your belly goes on the ground, you get a little bit of food. Your belly goes on the ground, you get a little bit of food. Okay? And it doesn't affect the relationship, guys. I can tell you this from experience. I've had dogs for several years. I have 4 competition dogs, and that's how I train them all. And it's never affected our relationship. And not all of these dogs are even biddable. Rust is not. He's not a biddable dog. Okay, but our relationship is strong. Even though I've used the ball, even though he's ball crazy, okay, I can stop him on a dime, no equipment, nothing, okay, because there is this understanding that we have. I don't need the ball to tell him down. I don't need the ball for him to come back to me. I don't need the ball for him to do simple things like that, okay. If I'm teaching skills, if I want to teach or enhance certain skills, then we might bring out some rewards, but it doesn't affect the training, doesn't affect the relationship. So going back to my message here, additionally, it's common practice to reward protection dogs with the ball during protection training, meaning, okay, you disengage, okay, now you're with me, now there's payment for you being with me. In protection sports training, it's not uncommon at all. So in protection sports training, if I send my dog for a bite, he's enjoying that bite, and then I call him to come back. You know, one of the hardest things for these dogs it doesn't matter if they're sport dogs, it's for them to let go of the decoy. They don't want to let go. You could even have the ball like waving around them, next to them, tell them, look, 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 I got the ball. They're still not going to let go of the ball, even though these dogs are ball crazy. Most of these dogs, they're like, I want the guy. I want to keep biting. The ball has much lower value compared to that. So even when protection training, sport protection training, even though we use the ball to reward the dog during the protection scenarios, the dog never goes, I'll take the ball over the decoy. It doesn't happen, okay? So again, the criteria is we have to have the right dog, and we have to have a mild idea of what we're doing. We have those two things, your dog is very unlikely going to go, oh, I'll just take the ball. Okay, so I continue on with my reply here. Okay. So the desire to chase a ball never exceeds protection work, even in those instances that I just mentioned. Even in prey drive, even in sport training, like I just mentioned to you. The only reason this might happen is if we don't have the right dog, and even then, it would still be unlikely due to the desire to self-preserve. That would override the desire to chase a ball. Okay, even if I get you a dog that has not been bred for protection training. Okay, I'm going to give you this hypothetical now. This is not on the text. Even if I get you a dog off a shelter, a dog bred for an entirely different purpose, that loves the ball. Okay, let's think, for instance, of just for the sake of the example, let's say I get you a golden retriever, and it's ball crazy, loves balls, and I put him in a self-preservation scenario, meaning like I get a big bad guy just charging at him, or him and his human happens to be holding the leash. If I get a big bad guy charging, at that dog's desire to chase the ball, even if it's not a properly selected dog for what we're talking about, you think that dog's going to want to chase the ball? Even if we got a ball right there, tennis ball right there? What will happen is that particular dog in this hypothetical scenario will very likely blow its anal glands and go, fuck that, I need to save myself first before I go for the ball. That's what would happen. So even in a scenario like that wouldn't happen. It's very, very unlikely to happen with a protection dog, right? Especially with her dog, because I know her dog. Okay. So she replies, thank you for explaining. Good to know. Now I send her a picture of my dog, and it's a still shot, and it's of Rust doing a muzzle attack on one of my helpers, one of my friends. He has a tug on his lap, big tug on his lap, and you can see clearly Rust hits him in the face, skips the tug entirely, and he's a sport dog. I posted that on a group. It was a comment that I made to somebody's post regarding a similar topic, right? Apparently this is a big area of concern for protection trainers. So I posted that picture, and on the YouTube channel I'll post the picture so you can see it. So if you're listening on the podcast and you want to see that picture, go to the YouTube channel, look for the same episode, and you'll see the picture on there. So even on there, you see the sport dog Rust, going for the guy's face. It's completely skipping the equipment. Now, when I posted that on that particular post on Facebook, the person that made the post told me, like, basically this was a prey garden scenario, which respectfully, that wasn't the case. He wasn't there. This was a send. This was not a prey guard scenario. I know what he's talking about. So he starts explaining the prey guard scenario, which I'm very familiar with. So I told him I'm familiar with the prey guard scenario, with what prey guard is. This was not the case in that particular still shot. What happened was there was two decoys, suited decoys, agitating, and then there's the helper that is unsuited, and he has a tug on his lap. And I send him for an attack on the unsuited decoy, and Russ entirely bypasses the tug and goes right for the helper's face. This was a send. This was an attack. This wasn't a prey guard scenario. A prey guard scenario would have been if Rust was posted and we had the tug on the ground and the helper was challenging Rust for the tug. That's prey guarding. So if that was the case, a lot of times the dog will get into a bit of guarding, okay, prey guarding scenario, meaning the dog eventually essentially tells the helper, don't touch my toy, right? So that's prey guarding. But in that scenario, that wasn't the case, which the gentleman insinuated that that's what was happening in the picture, which of course it wasn't because I was there. But yeah, you'll see it on the picture, and this was not a prey guarding scenario. This was a sport dog, very high prey drive that was taught. Okay, this didn't come naturally to him because he's a sport dog. I never done any personal protection with him. So he was taught to, go for the quote unquote man. So it is possible, and that's what I was trying to illustrate to my client. So I sent that picture to her, and I said to her, this is Rust, 100% sport dog, specifically used equipment for all aspects of protection training and used very little defense drive on purpose. And in this session, he completely bypassed the big tug on the helper's lap. Okay, so anyway, so then we have she replies, and then so I told her, feel free to ask if you have, anytime you have any questions. And I said it was a good question. Feel free to ask me if you have any more questions. So then she tells me, I saw some people talking about how they do not use toys or treats to train because police dog incidents. Now, this, I don't know. I don't know where she saw this. I imagine that probably on Facebook. I don't know the people who said it. I don't know what they saw. I can only imagine, I have no idea, honestly, what they saw. So my reply to her is, I have worked with so many police dogs, which is true. Okay, a lot of my experience has been with contract working dogs and police dogs. This is to give you a little bit of background on what I've done. So going back to my message, I have worked with so many police dogs and contract working dogs. Okay, and then it's what I said to her, which is true. The most undisciplined dogs were with handlers who did not use food or toys because their only reinforcement was pain compliance. Now back to you guys, back to the audience. This is 100% true. The dogs that were the most of a liability, the dogs that basically said fuck you to the handlers the most, the dogs that were like, no, fuck that, I want to bite. The dogs that did that the most were the ones that were with handlers that didn't use toys because the dogs main source of work, enjoyment, reward, whatever you want to call it. Okay, the main activity was, hey, in this scenario we're biting, right? So because there was nothing really on the other end to somewhat compliment the dog for paying attention to the handler, these dogs were like, nope, I want nothing to do with you. I want the real thing. I want the prey. I want the guy. And that is very, very true. If you're a dog trainer listening to this, and you work with police dogs, you could probably agree with me. Okay, if you've actually worked with police dogs, you've worked with military working dogs, and you've seen it, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So from my experience, what I tell them, going back to the message now, okay? The most undisciplined dogs were with handlers who did not use food or toys because their only reinforcement was pain compliance. The best and most reliable police dogs were the ones that were reinforced with food and toys. That's also true. and never affected their work. Now, also, I add here, which is also a big thing. If you work with police dogs, you'll know what I'm talking about here as I give the next sentence. Also, dual purpose dogs. Now, what a dual purpose dog is a dog that typically will do protection training and some sort of detection training. Okay. Yes, sometimes they're tracking dogs and protection dogs. Sometimes, that's qualified under the dual purpose category as well. But typically speaking, dual purpose dog is a dog that does some sort of detection training and some sort of protection training. So, here's what I said, right? Dual purpose dogs are rewarded with toys during detection training, and in some instances tracking, depending on the training system. That is true. So let's throw that theory out the window that a police dog trained with a ball will chase the ball over the guy. That's from my experience, not my observation, but from my experience. We can throw that out the window because the dual purpose dogs, guys, they get rewarded with toys. They get rewarded with toys. They get a ball, they get a Kong, right? They get a pipe, depending on the system. They get rewarded with a toy. And guess what? These dogs, when they're in protection mode, they never prefer the ball over the guy. So right there, we can throw that theory right out the window. So I don't know who said what, when they saw what. I'm sure maybe there was an incident that they saw. I don't even know if they saw it. They might have just been hypothesizing it. Right? Everybody's an expert on Facebook, right? And so, but if they happen to see it, who knows what the context was? Maybe they heard about it. I don't know. But from my experience, even the dual purpose dogs that are rewarded with toys, their protection work never, ever, ever gets affected. Those dogs never go, nah, man, I'd rather do some scent detection, than biting the guy. Very, very unlikely. Again, you could be throwing 10 tennis balls at the dog. The dog's still going to go, fuck that. I'm in bite work mode. I want to bite. Okay. So I said, dual purpose dogs are rewarded with toys during detection and even tracking in some instances. And they're still phenomenal dogs. So I said, it's a big myth that a dog trained with food or toys will not listen to you or be motivated by you, which again, from experience and observation, but mostly from experience, I can tell you that's not the case, okay? All of our working dogs, I'm talking about my personal dogs here, all of our working dogs, I have 4 of them, they love us, they listen to us, and there is no gear or rewards, okay? Meaning that even when we have no equipment, even when we have no toys, we don't have treat pouch, we don't have any of that, they'll still listen. We have a great relationship. This is from personal experience with my personal dogs. 4 Malinois, very different temperaments, very, very different. Rust is the most independent dog that I have. And even him, we have such a great understanding, such a great relationship. Even though he's the most ball crazy, the most independent, we have a good relationship. Using food and toys has never, ever gotten in the way. I can tell you this from experience. I'm talking to you now. So going back to her, all of our working dogs, they listen to us, gear or no gear, or no rewards. The use of rewards, toy or food, has never affected our relationship, nor their reliability. And then I continue with my message to her. When I was in Afghanistan as a trainer, this is a little story for you guys too. This is a little bit of a fun one. When I was in Afghanistan as a trainer, I was a trainer for a company in Afghanistan. The company was called AM-K9. Now, back when I was there, it was back in 2010, the company had just recently gotten the contract with the Department of Defense. So when we got to Afghanistan, we were, me with a group of other handlers and some management, we were stationed in Bagram, the eastern region. Now, when we were in Bagram, we were like the first group of people that got to Bagram. The first group of people in the company, I'm not saying ever, the first group of people from AM-K9 that established a presence in the eastern region of Afghanistan. So we got to Bagram, which is a big base. And our job was to essentially, the dogs that came in country by the company, okay, not the military working dogs. I'm talking about the contract working dogs. When the dogs got in country, they would first arrive in Kandahar, which is the big presence. The company had been there for some time in Kandahar. So from Kandahar, for them to go to some of the other regions, they would get shipped out from Kandahar to some of the other regions. The eastern region, Bagram, was a new region for AMK9. So that's what I'm talking about, right? So just give you a little bit of background. So I said when I was in Afghanistan as a trainer, I was a trainer there. I got written up and recommended to be demoted because one of my supervisors saw that I was using food and toys to troubleshoot dogs that had problems. And this is true. Okay, I'll give you a quick example. So it was a standard operating procedure that our dual purpose dogs, when they did detection, they were to be rewarded with a Kong. That was like every handler got a Kong. Well, I noticed some of our dogs were really not into it as much. They were like, yeah, I don't really want to search. They're just not as motivated. So one of the things that I would do is, because I got my training not with the military, I got my training with a different company. Some of the previous episodes, you'll hear details as to where I went to. So what I would do with some of these dogs is I would switch them from a Kong to another reward. Some of the things I did is I would get PVC pipe, and I noticed that these dogs were freaking like ecstatic when I switched them from a Kong to a PVC pipe. Some of these dogs, okay, the ones that basically were a little bit unmotivated to do scent detection, when we started rewarding them with the pipe, their motivation went through the roof. It's a different type of reward. They were more like pipe dogs, right? And I know this from my experience at the school I went to, because that's what we did. If the dog didn't like the pipe, we would give him a Kong. If the dog didn't like the Kong, we'll give him a PVC pipe. And they loved it. Whatever worked for the dog as a reward, we would do that. So the supervisor saw that as very strange. Now the supervisor was she was a kennel master in her, when she was in the Air Force. So she went up to the ranks. She was a handler in the Air Force, then probably became a trainer, then probably became a kennel master, and then she retired from the Air Force. And I don't know how many years had gone by before she started working then for AMK9. But when she saw that, that was a big red flag. Now, people, I don't know how it is now, but back then when I was working with the military working dogs as well, because we work with them quite often, our teams were certified by the military working dog certifying officials. So I was a little bit familiar with their SOP, and they're very strict, very rigid. Some of our SOP, a lot of our SOP actually was in line with the military working dog SOP, because the company hired a lot of prior military working dog personnel. So the SOP was similar. And this lady was no different. So she had a big problem with that, right? Another thing I would do is, if we had a scent detection dog, which we're looking for explosives, I'm going a little bit deeper into the story to give you background here. But some of our dogs that were explosive detection dogs, these dogs, they have to be crazy for, searching. We want them to search like maniacs, but we don't want them to act like maniacs, because we're looking for explosives, very sensitive stuff. We don't want them bouncing off the walls, right? We want to preserve their energy, so we want to kind of slow them down a little bit. Not a lot, but just we want to give them pattern. We want to give them a little bit more of a methodical search. But we would have some Malinois that were freaking insane. I mean, amazing dogs, but just bounce off the freaking walls, okay? No pattern whatsoever. They were just full of piss and vinegar. We'll do a training session, and the dog would just be bouncing all over the place. The problem also was Well, when the dog would, by the time the dog got to the odor, the dog would be exhausted because it spent so much energy bouncing and turning and spinning that by the time the dog got to the first odor, the dog would be exhausted. So one of the things that I did, which worked phenomenal, okay, is I used food to slow him down. Okay, I used food to slow him down. Now, we also proofed the dog off of food. So it's not like now food was the main thing. So I was okay. I told the handler, we're going to use food to proof him, meaning we're going to put food in certain key places as a proofing odor, meaning just because we're using food doesn't mean the food is king. Okay, we're only using food temporarily to slow him down, but we're also going to use food as little traps, meaning if there is food, you don't alert on food, and there's a penalty for alerting, which the dog, of course, has such amazing hunt drive. The dog wanted the reward. It didn't just want the thrill of the food. It wanted the thrill of the search. But we still proofed him off of food. But we used food temporarily to slow him down, and it worked amazing. This dog suddenly became so methodical in his search. Okay, it was amazing to watch. If I could show you the before and after, it was beautiful, right? So anyway, so this is another thing that this supervisor had a problem with. She was like, what the hell is this guy doing? He's using pipes, he's using food, and then on protection training, some of the dogs that were not as motivated to out, they had to out because they had to certify. That's one of the things they had to certify on. So because they were not as engaged with their handler, I would do the same thing. I'd be like, look, there's one of the things that you're going to do is when the dog does out, which we want him to out, I want you to come back to the dog, kind of heel away with the dog, and reward him with some food to let him know, over the toy, to let him know that, look, it pays to pay attention to your handler, which, by the way, we do a lot of that in protection sports training, okay? So, of course, we did that, and, of course, the dogs responded really well. And, of course, she had a problem. So, anyway, so she pulls me. I'm telling you the story now, okay? So she pulls me into the office one day, and I have no idea what's going on. Now, to give you a little bit of context, she was also fucking one of the other trainers who had a problem. That's a little bit of a long story, but anyway, not to dive too deep into that. So she brings me in and she has this document in front of her. She hands it to me, and she tells me, "Well, I think the best thing to do is," and she has me read it, and basically said that she was recommended me to be demoted. And her reason was that I was confusing dogs and the handlers by using other rewards, basically outlining some of the things that I was telling you, okay, which worked really well. And so she said, I think that it's the best for you to be a handler, which, look, I don't have a problem with being a handler. I just have a problem with the pay cut. Look, if you're going to demote me, that's one thing, but like the pay cut is also, a factor, right? So anyway, so that's what the main thing I had a problem with. So I told her, hey, I'm just gonna put my 2 weeks notice here. I told her that, and so what I did is, I left. She's no, that's not what I'm talking about. I was like, no, it's all right. I'm like, I completely understand. And then she starts kind of quizzing me. Like, she's like, where'd you learn this? I'm like, well, I learned it at this place. And she's almost like trying to test to see if I was, making shit up, which I found again, she's almost she's questioning my integrity. She starts asking me basically, do you really know, are you being honest with your experience? That's essentially what she was asking me. Now, this person was new, okay? She came in afterwards, so a little bit of background on the story too. So by the time this supervisor was stationed with us in Bagram, I had already been there with the project manager, in that region. I had been there with the project manager, and several teams, like probably about 100 teams, maybe a little bit less than 100 teams, had already gone, already come to us. We troubleshot their problems, got them ready for certification, and then went out into their FOBs, their forward operating bases. So they're smaller bases in the eastern region. So by the time all of this happens, right, it's been a year. Several teams have gone through. I've been able to troubleshoot issues that came to us. About a year after that, that's when this lady, this supervisor, comes to us. So she wasn't with us from the beginning. She came to us once the Bagram region, the eastern region, was very established. Then they were able to send more personnel. They were able to sort of organize things a little bit more. So by the time she came, she barely knew me, right? She actually had just been there about 3 weeks, or even maybe less than 3 weeks. It was a very short period of time before she wrote me up and decided that the best thing for me would be to go back as a handler, take the pay cut and all of that. So of course, what I did is I was like, no, not a big deal. I'll just resign. So what I did after that is I messaged her supervisor, which we had a pretty, he understood, we had a pretty good relationship. So I messaged him. I told him, hey, I just want to let you know, thank you for the opportunity. It was great. And here's my resignation letter. He called me right away, and he was like, well, Will, what is going on? And I told her, well, I explained to him what happened. I was like, well, look, it's nothing against the company. Everything's great. But I just came out of the office of this person, and she is recommending that I get demoted, which I'm not okay with, so I'm just going to resign. And he was like, whoa, like, what is going on? So essentially, long story short, he had a talking with her and said, look, like, Will has been helping the eastern region, right? Because what would happen is these teams that would come, they would come in to Afghanistan from the U.S., they'd be shipped to Afghanistan. And then from Kandahar, they go to the other regions, Bagram, the eastern region being one of them. When they got to Bagram, before going to their FOBs, to their smaller bases, they would have to get certified by a military working dog official, so by an Army official that did the certifications for us. He didn't work with us. He wasn't part of the staff. He was just like a third party that would go, hey, I just need to make sure that your teams can certify before I can sign off on it and then go into their FOBs and do what they're supposedly good at doing. So our teams had to get verified. They had to get certified by a military official, right? Somebody from the military working dog program. And so for a year, that's what we did. Right? The teams would come to us and would have about a few weeks to get them certified, which these dogs had the main training. They had the main, they understood bite work. They understood scent detection, but they had some issues sometimes, issues like they didn't want to out. Well, they had to out. They had to have obedience. That was part of the certification. They had to do searches, blind searches. Right, so that was part of certification. So these guys had to certify. And if they didn't certify, they didn't get shipped out to the FOBs. And if they didn't certify, they would have like a week or so before they had another chance to try to recertify. If they failed certification 3 times in a row, the handler got a one-way ticket back home. He could get fired. And the dog would be reassigned to somebody else. Right? And now the company is one team short in that hypothetical scenario. So there was a lot of pressure on us and me as the trainer, as I was the only trainer there for about a year. There was a lot of pressure on us for us to troubleshoot these dogs' issues, all of them, right? And some of these dogs were great. Very little things that we had to troubleshoot. But some of them were like very difficult dogs, right? The dogs had to find the explosives in the certification. It's not like, oh yeah, I mean, he found 1 or 2 out of 4, he's good. He had to find, if there were 4 hides, the team had to find all 4 of them in a way that was safe. Like if the handler I would ignore some safety factors, because again, they're looking for explosives. If the handler ignores some safety factors, some safety things, some safety issues, that would also get them disqualified. That would also get them failed. So there were so many things that we had to help these handlers through. So I had done that for a year. Okay, like I had a good track record. I was helping these handlers. I was helping the dogs. I was helping troubleshoot issues, and they were freaking passing. And sometimes they would fail. Would troubleshoot the issue. Would get them passing. So I did that for about a year, and then when the company was established, that's when this lady came over to us. Now there's more organization. The Eastern region is a little bit more established. We have plenty of teams. Now this lady comes, she sees some of the stuff I'm doing, and she says, no, you're doing it all wrong. You're not doing it according to SOP. So I'm going to recommend that you get demoted. And so when I said to the country manager, hey, I'm going to resign, that's when he stepped in and said, no, you're not resigning. You're not getting demoted. Okay, you're not getting demoted, and I'm going to talk to her. And so essentially that's what happened. So this is what I told her, right? I told her that. And this is just to give you and her an idea, okay, of how old school that mentality is. Okay, and she claimed that using food and toys was confusing the dogs, which was the exact opposite. Okay, and I said to her, that's how stuck in the past some people are. They can and often see what supposedly does not work, and it actually works, and they still are committed to their ideas. Okay? Just like I believe that gentleman, when I showed him the picture, he saw something entirely different than what actually happened. He saw prey guarding when that's not what happened. But, in the particular case of that lady that tried to demote me, the biggest issue she saw was, she told me, you shouldn't be using all the toys. They should be using Kongs. And as she's telling me this, in my mind, I'm going, what is wrong with you? You use whatever works. I'm thinking that. Like, why is this even a point of contention? Why are you so committed to these teams? That was a big thing for her. You shouldn't be using all the toys. They should be using Kongs. When she told me that, like very sternly, as one of the reasons why I should be demoted, I was baffled. I was like, that is amazing to me, that is an issue that you're having. But anyways, so that's basically how the conversation ended, and that is my experience on the topic. Okay, I went a couple of different directions here on this topic, which is why the topic is longer than it usually is. Normally my episodes are about half an hour. This one's nearly an hour now. But that's what I wanted to give you. I wanted to give you my take on it. If you have any questions, if there are more details on this that you want me to expand on, let me know. Comment, send me a message. And hey, make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel. Dog Training is My Passion. You can follow me on Instagram as well. The handle is Dog Training is My Passion. And it's the same thing on Facebook. So just shoot me a message, comment, and let me know. And I will be very happy to make an episode on your questions. See you guys in the next episode.